Hello, it's John Heaton, and I'm back after Christmas, and Happy New Year to everyone. And today, it's been 8 years. I just saw that since I've reviewed this album, so I'm going to revisit it. And it's Wings' last album, Back to the Egg. This is my Indian copy with the shiny cover, which is quite unusual. Shiny back cover as well. Comes with the inner sleeve. It's one of 3 copies I have to show you today. Came out in June '79. As I say, it turned out to be the last Wings album. That wasn't the plan at the time. But Paul put a lot of work into promoting it. Radio interviews in the US and the UK, I seem to remember, and which I've checked out subsequently, retrospectively. 2 new recruits in Wings to replace Jimmy McCulloch and Joe English. So we had Steve Holley on drums, who drummed with Elton John on the Single Man album, and Lawrence Juba on guitar, both of whom were brought in courtesy of Denny Laine. They were both friends with Denny, and so Denny hooked them up for this gig, and they were very happy to be part of Wings. And the first thing we ever heard from this lineup, by the way, this comes on the back of London Town, and London Town had received mixed reviews, and a lot of people said it was too soft. And so I think what Paul is doing here is actually making a deliberate attempt to have a harder edge. That was certainly the suspicion when this album came out. And it works to some extent, and on the other hand, one can't quite escape the nagging feeling that he's trying a bit too hard to have the sort of punky sound. But we'll come back to that later. The first thing we got from the new lineup was a single called Good Night Tonight. This is my 12-inch, beautiful 12-inch picture there with them dressed up in their 20s clothes and hairstyle. And on the back, so it's backed with Daytime, Nighttime Suffering, which is an outstanding track, one of Paul and Linda's favourites, no less. Good song about feminism, and great video to go with this. I can't think why they didn't do a video for Daytime, Nighttime Suffering, because they did a video for a lot of the tracks on Back to the Egg, which didn't actually get aired on the TV for a couple of years, but that's another story, because this is the days before MTV, which didn't get launched until August 1981, and this was June '79. So this is my alternative 7-inch French pressing of the single with the alternative cover. It's on the Parlophone label, but a slightly different French Parlophone there, and the sort of boring back cover there. So it got to number 5, so it actually restored Paul to chart favour, because his second and third singles from the London Town album hadn't done anything really. I think I've Had Enough got to number 42 and London Town gone to number 60, but most fans already had the album, so why release 2 or 3 singles from an album? It's not really necessary. But anyway, they hadn't done very well. This was back to the top 5, so very pleasing. And then the album came out, and the album did not include, as was the custom at the time, did not include the single. And a lot of people have speculated whether the album would have been better had it included either one or both of the tracks from that single. I'm not really in that camp. I think it's fine the way it was, and I find it difficult to leave out a track from Back to the Egg, even though I think it's a mixed bag. If you force me, I would say maybe Baby's Request could have been a B-side to Good Night Tonight, because they kind of go well together, both sort of old style, well, particularly the video for Good Night Tonight. Old style song like Baby's Request could have gone well as a B-side, and then have Daytime, Nighttime Suffering on the album. But anyway, I'm not going to go on about that too much, because as I say, I don't really believe in sort of resequencing albums. You could make an argument for it. This is my original UK copy with the matted cover, and this is signed on the back by Denny Laine. All the best, John. Denny Laine, from the time in 1987 when I was following him around the pub circuit in London, and he was always available for a drink in the bar after the gig or before the gig, or both, or during the gig even. And this is my US copy, which I picked up on the Lower East Side in one of those great record shops. I paid $20 for it, which is quite expensive, but what's good about it is it has the hype sticker. So I was very happy to have that, and it's also in the shrink wrap, although the shrink wrap has been broken. It's in good condition, and it's got the wings back to the egg there. So I think basically, and Paul has done this a lot in his career, brought out an album and not even put the name of the band on the album. So hoping it's going to just sell itself based on his picture and the band's picture. But that was a kind of risky move, considering the other two members, Lawrence and Steve, were new. Anyway, that's how it was. So what else have we got to say? So he was always intending, I think, to tour on the back of this album, so that's why he made a lot of the songs on the albums kind of sort of stage-friendly numbers. And there's a couple of numbers which didn't make the album, which I'll come to in a minute, because I have this bootleg of the Back to the Egg sessions, which has sort of early takes, or early mixes of the final album mix. Not much different, to be honest. Just a bit of tidying up to be done here and there. But there's a couple of tracks which didn't make the album, which are on one of which is on there, and one of which is on a Denny Laine album called Japanese Tears. Before I go through the tracks, just show you my sheet music, which is a beautifully packaged affair with the egg menu there with the songs, and then at the back, I'm not going to tear them out, but it's 4 postcards, Back to the Egg postcards, and then obviously all the music, and then interspersed with pictures from the video sessions for this album, which were all done in the space of a couple of days down in Kent somewhere, I think. So that's the sheet music. So let's go to the tracks. Well, I think it opens really well with Reception. I mean, I love that bass line from Paul, and it's just a short introductory number with the radio playing in the background, and I think it's fine. It's a good opener, and then it goes very well into Getting Closer. So some people say We're Open Tonight should have opened the album. Maybe thematically it might have worked better, but I think Reception is a good opener, followed by Getting Closer, and then We're Open Tonight. And Getting Closer is a storming rocker. I mean, one has to say the lyrics are not much to write home about, and perhaps that it's because the lyrics on this week are particularly weak, really, that he thought, well, I'm not going to include them, and not going to include the lyric sheet because I don't want people poring over them and criticising them. As he said in the lyrics book, some of the songs on this album, he was particularly talking about Old Siam Sir, Paul said it's more about the riff and the groove than the actual lyrics. So I can forgive Paul for some of the lyrics on this album. Others grate a little bit. We'll come to that in a minute. We're Open Tonight, perfectly fine acoustic little number, atmospheric, introducing the album, although it doesn't open the album. And then Spin It On is a pretty direct attempt to do a kind of punky song, and the lyrics are pretty dire, it has to be said, if you check them out. I'm not even going to read them out, but pretty dire lyrics, but a fun video to go with this, and good drumming from Steve Holley, and quite an energetic sound. Very short song though. Again and again and again. This is my mate Dave Costello's favourite track on the album, and I think it's up there in my top 3 or 4 for sure. I think it's a brilliant Denny Laine song, and the video they do for this in the field with the flowers, the yellow flowers, is just hilarious. And I think Paul sings very good harmony vocals on this, as he did on Deliver Your Children, and they work well together as a band, and they look as if they're really enjoying it in the video, and I'm sure they did enjoy this song in the studio because it's a really catchy number. Could have even been a single in an alternative universe. And then we go to Old Siam Sir, which was the single and only got to number 35, which was not strong by Paul's standards, and a bit of a shock. I remember being at school, being slightly less embarrassed by the song because it was quite a rocky song and people were not taking the mickey out of it, but chart-wise it didn't do anything. But I think it's a great little number and a great riff. The opinion is divided as to whether it was Steve Holley who came up with the riff or when it was Denny Laine. But anyway, the song is credited to McCartney alone, so even if one of the others did come up with that riff at the beginning, they didn't receive a songwriting credit. So that was Old Siam Sir, one of my probably my favourite song on the whole album. And Arrow Through Me finishes side 1. Beautiful melodic song. yeah, romantic lyrics, nothing wrong with that. It works very well in context. And in the video, they're all playing keyboards. Although on the record, I'd probably think it was just Paul and Denny probably playing the keyboards with Linda. In the video, they're all playing keyboards, maybe with the exception of Steve Holly, who's playing drums. So that's a really nice closer and really lovely tune. And that was the only song from this album which made that. Remember that compilation a few years ago, the Pure McCartney compilation? He did put this track on there, and I think it was the only track from this album that featured on that. Then we turn over to side 2, and we've got Rockestra theme. Well, to be honest with you, I can live without Rockestra. I don't think it was. I mean, may have been a quite good idea in his head, but I think in reality, when he came to the studio and he had all these great musicians, and they were asked to play this rather throwaway instrumental, they must have been thinking, what are we doing here? Because it really is nothing special at all. I suppose vaguely interesting chord changes in the middle, quite like the minor chord changes in the middle, but on the whole, don't much care for this song. And the line at the end, why haven't we got any dinner, is, it's a bit reminiscent of the Liverpool Oratorio, where there's a line in that saying, where is my dinner? I mean, what is this obsession with dinner anyway? Not a favourite of mine. To You, a much better rocker, and I think this is a good track, even though the lyrics are not strong again. It's got a really good riff at the beginning, and the band are playing it well, and it's an energetic track. I like it. After the Ball, Million Miles, 2 very nice ballads, nice melody. The lyrics to After the Ball are a bit silly because, I can't really imagine Paul McCartney going to a ball and then sort of getting lost and coming out and Linda saving him outside. Or it probably isn't autobiographical, which makes it even less sense. So I find the lyrics quite annoying of this song, I must say. But it's a minor criticism because he sings it well, and it's a good tune. And then Million Miles is a pretty harmless, quite repetitive song with, quite a nice mood to it, and it works well. And Winter Rose, Love Awake, I think this is my preferred medley of the 2. Beautiful piano. The version on the bootleg was an extended intro at the beginning of the song, which got cut short, and the beautiful videos to go with both, with Paul and Linda walking around in the snow, and I think it was fake snow because it was filmed in June, with the White Horse, and then inside Limp Castle in Kent, strumming acoustic guitars, performing Love Awake, which just has beautiful chord changes. And yeah, the lyrics are sentimental, but it works here, and I love the mood of the song, and it's a very nice setting for the video. So that was Love Awake. And then the broadcast, he gets the owner of Limp Castle to read out a couple of poems. I think it's by John Galsworthy and one other. We've got a chance, so we'll take it. And I think it's brilliant. And Paul's playing sort of a piano in the background, and it's in the key of, I can't remember the key, but it's one where it basically is all on the black notes, so it's quite a tricky key to play, but it's quite a simple song to learn, and I learned it from this sheet music book, and it's a fun one to play. So I like that. A lot of people don't. Apparently David Bowie, when he was visiting McCartney at the studio and he was played some of the tracks, he jokingly said to Paul, that should be the single. He probably wasn't serious, but anyway, so glad to see you here as another orchestra number. And again, one has to fear what Jimmy Page and Pete Townsend were thinking when they were asked to play this mundane rocker. That's all I can call it. I don't like it. I think it's weak. I think he's trying to write a rocker for the sake of it, a bit like the songs on Broad Street, No Values and Not Such a Bad Boy. But this song, if anything, is even weaker. And the lyrics are terrible. It just does nothing for me. And if there's one song you could leave off the album, it would be this. I can see some of you not agreeing with that, but that's fine. And then Baby's Request is a kind of old style 40s number set in a World War II setting in the deserts for the video, and a very nice song. I remember Andy Peebles in the McCartney 2 interview with McCartney in 1980 saying this was his favourite track from Back to the Egg. And Baby's Request was revisited for the Kisses on the Bottom album. as a bonus track, I think, on the extended version. So it's a nice closer, although I'm not sure if it really fits in with the rest of the album. But then again, the album isn't all rockers, and it's got ballads on it, like every McCartney album. So I think it wasn't intended to be a complete rocker of an album, but a nice mixture, eclectic mixture of Paul's styles as always, and I wouldn't change too much. Just here and there I maybe would change a couple of things. So as I say, they went on tour. They did a 20 gig tour in the UK, and they were supposed to go on to Japan and then other parts of the world in 1980. So they started in Liverpool on the 23rd of November, and then they progressed to Manchester, and then they went down to Southampton and Brighton, Lewisham in London, and then Birmingham, Wembley first, 3 nights, then Birmingham, Glasgow for 2 nights, which is where we get the live versions of Maybe I'm Amazed and Every Night and Hot as Sun on the McCartney first McCartney album archive edition. Those songs, those live versions, all taken from Glasgow, and then Coming Up was also recorded live in Glasgow, and that was released as the A-side in the States and got to number 1. Even though in the UK they went with the studio version, which got to number 2, I remember. In the US, for some reason, they preferred the live version. I can't think why, because I think the studio version is head and shoulders above it. I know not everyone agrees. Adrian Allen, you don't agree for one, I know. Anyway, the tour culminated with the Kampuchea concert on the 29th of December at Hammersmith Odeon. And interestingly, the set list was roughly the same. They started including Let It Be towards the end of the tour, and then for 29th of December they had Orchestra. All the people from Orchestra were on hand to play, so they finished the set list with Orchestra theme, Let It Be, Lucille, and then revived the Orchestra theme. And interestingly, they played Wonderful Christmas Time throughout the tour leading up to Christmas, but on the 29th of December they didn't play it. So it was probably, the reason for that is either by the 29th of December you're sick of hearing Christmas songs, or else Paul was embarrassed to play it in front of all his mates like John Bonham and John Paul Jones. Maybe he thought, well, this is a bit of a twee number, I'm not sure. But anyway, he didn't play it on that night with everyone there for the Kampuchea. So the track listing, there were 5 songs from Back to the Egg featured: Getting Closer, Spin It On, Again and Again and Again, Arrow Through Me, and what song did I not mention? Maybe there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, Getting Closer, Spin It On, Again and Again and Again, Old Siam Sir, Arrow Through Me, and then also they opened with Got to Get You Two Into My Life, Beatles number from Revolver, of course, and then Every Night from the first McCartney album. I've Had Enough was featured from London Town, No Words from Band on the Run, Cook of the House from Speed of Sound with Linda singing. Not sure if I would have selected that for the track listing, but I guess Paul was just wanted to give Linda a bit in the spotlight. Maybe I'm Amazed is here, The Fool on the Hill, Hot as Sun from the first album, 20 Flight Rock, Go Now, which Denny had performed with Wings, obviously, in previous tours. Coming Up, as I mentioned, Good Night Tonight, Wonderful Christmas Time, Yesterday, Mull of Kintyre, and Band on the Run. I don't think Mull of Kintyre was performed at Kampuchea. Could be wrong, but I think they dropped that. But that was played in all the gigs leading up to Christmas, I think, particularly in Glasgow where they had the bagpipe band. They probably had the bagpipe band. I didn't see the tour. The only person I know who saw the tour was James Boyce. So if you can tell me whether they played Mull of Kintyre at the gig you were at, that would be good. I could look it up, I suppose, but I think they kept the set list pretty much the same, apart from including Let It Be later on in the orchestra. As I said, for the 29th of December gig, and then a few days later they did a bit of rehearsing, but for the Japan tour, got on the plane, and we all know what happened when they landed at Tokyo Airport and the tour was cancelled. Denny Laine got disillusioned, came up with Japanese Tears, which I think is quite an affectionate tribute to the Wings fans who lost out after years of waiting. Well, other people said he was opportunistic. But that album, Japanese Tears, includes an outtake from Back to the Egg, which I think is delightful, called Weep for Love, where it's great harmony singing from Paul, Linda and Denny, and very philosophical words about the state that the world's in, and really think that could have easily made the album, and the album would have benefited. So that was my opinion of Weep for Love, which you can check out on Japanese Tears, and it's on Spotify as well. So what do I think of this album overall? I think I have a very soft spot for it because I think it was the second McCartney album I bought on the day of release. I go back to it fairly often. I think, if anything, it's a little bit overrated by fans in the same way that Ram is, but I wouldn't argue too much with people who put this very high on the list, because it's pretty high on my list. It's certainly in my top 10 post-Beatles McCartney albums. Is it preferable that Wings split up and he had a solo career after this? Well, opinion is divided on this as well. I mean, I would have preferred Wings to stay together for at least one more album, so we could have got to know this lineup a bit better, because all we've got is one album and one tour, one short tour in the UK, and we're obviously still waiting for the archive release. But I think it would have been nice if Tug of War had been a Wings album. That's just my opinion, because I think when he went solo, he had the tendency to do a few too many duets, and with Carl Perkins or Stevie Wonder or Michael Jackson. And that's okay for one or two, but after a while it gets a bit, why is he doing these duets? He's much better on his own. But I don't know, he wanted the freedom to work with the other musicians, and he said a band was restricting. But I don't really he's entitled to his opinion, of course, but I don't see how it's that restricting having a band like Wings, because they're always just sidesmen for Paul, and maybe he didn't think they were good enough. I mean, Linda did say a very unkind remark in 1984 about the Wings. We didn't hire good enough people in Wings. They were good but not great, and Paul had to carry the weight of all the responsibility on his shoulders, which I think was a very sort of ingenuous remark. But maybe that came on the back of Denny Laine slagging off the McCartneys in The Sun, because that was around about that time. Anyway, so I really rate this album. Check it out if you don't know it. Just before I go, I just want to say I'm in the middle of listening to it's called a Fabcast, and it features Howie, Ed Elson, Stephen Bard, and there's an episode called Life and Death I'm listening to, which is all about the day John Lennon died. And there's a fascinating interview with Jack Douglas, brilliant stuff which I'd never heard before, which is quite early on. It's within the first hour of that. It's a 3-hour podcast, by the way. Anyway, just thought I'd mention that. So what have I showed you? All 3 copies of Back to the Egg? I think so. So this was Back to the Egg. That's the back cover, all looking pretty cool. And unfortunately, this lineup was short-lived. But hopefully we'll see the archive release. This is a Tom Snyder interview. This DVD includes interviews with John from 75, Ringo 81, and Paul, Linda, Denny and Lawrence in December 79 in Liverpool, just before they went on stage. And this is worth checking out if you haven't got that. Obviously we had the Christmas single credited, interestingly, just to Paul McCartney, and that might have done the trick in getting it into the top 10, because it was his number 6 hit, I seem to remember. And then Kampuchea, the album is available, this double album, which came out in 1981. It was delayed, and the whole of side 4 is Paul McCartney and Wings and Rockestra. So side 4, Got to Get You Into My Life, Every Night, coming up, Lucille, Let It Be, Rockestra theme. So that's nice to have with the gatefold, the picture of Paul there. And Elvis Costello is playing on one of the other nights, as is Ian Dury, Queen, The Who, The Clash, Rockpile, Dave Edmunds. Did I mention The Who? I think so. So thank you. And I was going to read some reviews out. Basically, Rolling Stone slagged off Back to the Egg, but that's their problem. I would agree that it's weak lyrically, but I think musically it's very strong. A very strong album indeed. Thank you for watching. See you next time.